Hello, everybody. I'm Martin Loppers. I'm Chief Chatbot of Supply Chain Media. You might know me of my role as editor-in-chief of the quarterly magazine Supply Chain Movement. We're going to have a great webinar, interactive one with a lot of questions, hopefully. It will be about the new reality for integrated logistics, and it's all about extended visibility and collaboration. With me, I have two experts. You see my picture, upper left corner, it's me. And next to me, I have Marcel Kars from Oracle with me. Marcel, hi.
Hi, Martijn.
Hi there. Good afternoon. And I have Dominic Regan, also of Oracle. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, Martijn.
Right. So for everybody, you're all on mute, except the three experts, or two experts and me. And this webinar will be recorded. And after this, we'll also make the presentation available as PDF. And I will ask some questions to these experts. But next to that, you can also ask questions. You will see the questions pane, the questions panel on the right-hand side. So you can ask questions right away. And if you do so, and these questions are in line at what we are discussing at that moment, I will start asking these questions right away. So we'll keep it interactive the whole hour through. So make sure that you'll ask your questions whenever it's up to you, and then I'll make sure that they will be asked. Okay, first, why this webinar? Supply Chain Media has done a research earlier this year in March, actually. And as you can see, visibility is a main topic. Not only the capacity of the supplier side, that's one of the bottlenecks, but also outbound transportation to customers, also lack of the demand visibility from customers, and inbound. So both in the inbound and the outbound flow, there were bottlenecks, and it's all related to visibility. So that was a huge problem. So visibility is an issue. And next to that, we did another survey in June, and among 106 manufacturing companies in Europe. And next to sales and operations planning, the main topic is end-to-end supply chain visibility. So all these companies, the majority of these companies are going to invest in end-to-end supply chain visibility solutions. So that's what we're going to discuss in this webinar. All right. So we're going to talk about the new reality of integrated logistics. And first, there is a statement Oracle is obliged to show. But Marcel, I want to ask how does the new reality looks like?
Yeah, thanks, Martijn. How does it look like? Well, first of all, a good afternoon to everybody, and hope to have everybody on the phone in good health these days. And a pleasure to meet up with you also, Martijn, because I think we haven't seen each other a couple of years. And as we were preparing yesterday, I saw we both lost a little bit of hair, and we're wearing glasses, but
yes.
All good. And yeah, so I would say, the most important thing for us to do today is to, with Dominic and I, is to share basically what we've learned around the last 6 months. So we've been working with a lot of leading companies. Obviously, we serve a lot of leading companies, seen a lot of things, and have gone through some very special experiences. So we've been working with companies that obviously were completely stopped. We were working with companies where production just doubled within days. We've seen situations that we were working for companies that have both doubled and halved, depending on the product lines that they have within days. So it was really a struggle. And I think, well, at least I've never seen that. I'm 53. I've never seen this in my life. And
No.
but it was very special. And I think we also learned a lot of things from it. And it was especially interesting to see how different companies, handled it, how well they were prepared or totally unprepared. And I think those lessons learned, especially the trends that we've seen, because a lot of the old trends, I think we could just throw away. A lot of the new trends that we've seen is something that we would like to share here with everybody.
Mm-hmm.
If I take this slide, so what we've tried to do is to highlight a few of the main trends I think that we see. So, first of all, I think it's good for everybody to know that we have as Oracle, we have a complete end-to-end supply chain suite. So I think it positions us well to discuss the whole end-to-end. We're not a point solution provider, but our suite is used really end-to-end by our customers. So I think we're in a good position to see what is happening. I would say, I think everybody, now understood that what we had before wasn't bringing us any further. It's the usual way of managing supply chains. It's just not working anymore. And we've seen a lot of examples in the past few months. Things like working with averages. Typically things that I always saw is you have schedules, and a schedule can be like, okay, a simple thing like, this boat can take 2 weeks to go from A to B. Well, we've seen that is just absolutely irreliable. It didn't work anymore. Another thing that we've seen is, for instance, demand planning, complete moving target. So definitely something that we've learned from our customers is that they need continuous forecasting. And it has to be based on real-time data, not something that, from history you can rely on stuff. It's completely changed. Another thing that we definitely found is a great need for insight, for alerts, and much better ways to collaborate. A good recent example that we've seen is a collaboration, for instance, between us and a DHL company called Resilience 360. You may know.
Yeah.
They monitor continuously all the worldwide supply chain threats, whatever it is, from block ports, strikes, weather risks, whatever. And how can you integrate that, for instance, in your planning? How can you really integrate it in your planning process? Another thing that became very apparent is, especially with larger customers, is the need for scenario planning. Simulation tools, things like, give you an example. Let's say a transport lane is blocked. So what do? A regional DC gets blocked. What do? Or even proactive, like we want to put a plan down for 4 weeks because of maintenance. How do we handle that? What kind of scenarios can you run to make sure you have an optimal alternative for that specific period? And especially use your own historic data to do simulations, and not just simulate with some white space data. Yeah. I think another thing that was very clear is that all the systems that we want to bring to market, and I think people use, is they have to be based on real-time information. It's about real-time visibility, and especially at any point in the supply chain. And that's something I think that we lack. And we need to show systems that is, it's what is now different than we would expect. And where is that difference taking place? At what point does it happen? And especially also, when does it happen? So also there, I think we've been living with systems that we would find something out after the equation. Half a day later or a day later, when things happen, there starts to be a real problem. And if we go a step further, especially where we are working on, is we see that if you have an end-to-end planning system, is that you can understand the impact if something goes wrong at this moment, what the impact will be on the next step, and how do you work with that? Can you advise someone, if something goes wrong here, what the next step should be? Or can you already send alerts to people further up in the supply chain if you see something happening here? And it can be very simple things like, the impact on a warehouse when a production line stops. Or you can see the impact on a transport plan when an order gets delayed in the warehouse. At the moment, we have systems, for instance, that you can recall a shipment automatically through IoT and blockchain when a temperature, let's say, gets out of range a couple of hours during transport. And what we can also do is to, for instance, to make sure that these systems can be accessed from everywhere in the world. And it's also something that I think was a big learning curve for many people, is that you used to go to somewhere and then start working. What if you cannot work? What if you cannot go there anymore? How do you handle that? that was definitely a big learning curve as well. Let's see. How shall I move on here? A couple of other trends that we definitely seen is the sales of services. Something quite new, I think, for many. We see that more and more products are sold as a service, and many times people have to add a subscription to that service.
Yes.
So, can your systems cope with that? How can you just add services and pay for that use within your existing systems? That's definitely be a big one. Another big one that we've seen is flexible sourcing. Actually, I was a couple of years with one of the main technical companies in the mobile space, in the printing space, and what I've learned there, for instance, is you have sometimes to move things so fast, and that really means to another plant, another country. We were, for instance, at that moment, we were completely caught by surprise by the first struggle between the US and China, and sometimes you need to move out things very quickly. Can you do that? Can you change suppliers? What effect does that have on your product landing cost? It goes very far, and if you all have to figure these things out by hand, it becomes very tricky. And we've seen some of our customers that were really prepared for those kind of quick changes. They could just do that. I think at the end, but it's probably also the beginning of the product, is that we see product innovations going faster and faster. And information flow goes super fast. So you see people copying each other products almost, well, the speed of light is a little bit exaggerated, but it goes super quick. So before a competitor has launched, a product, another competitor has already brought the next one to market. So it goes really fast. And what we dare see, for instance, is more and more that stuff gets connected. So, for instance, that you embed sourcing and alternative sourcing already in the moment that you do the design phase. So you already know, like, with these components, where do you source them? Do you have alternatives, et cetera, et cetera? That's definitely a big trend that we've seen. So I think enough said about the trends. Would like to present through Dominic a couple of the things that we've been working on extensively to give you the answers to those trends. So with all pleasure, give it over to Dominic.
Yeah. So first, I want to step in. You have this slide
Sure.
with a lot about agility, but a lot of companies need agility. But what triggers the need for agility? So is it on a daily basis, on a monthly basis? That is intriguing me right now. But let's look at the building blocks Oracle is delivering. So first, Dominic, logistic orchestration. Now, what we saw in our analysis in the survey, it's very, very paramount with inbound flows, outbound flows, and all of the visibility. So let's look at orchestration right now. So Dominic, so what are the challenges in order orchestration?
Okay, yeah, thank you, Martijn. And again, let me just add my welcome to people. I'm Dominic Regan. I've been working in the supply chain space for the last, just over 30 years now. And I guess, I started in the warehousing space, and then for the last, whatever it is, 20 years, I've been in the transportation space. And I think, when we look at orchestration, I'm sure a lot of people on the call are familiar with those classic type of execution services that you see on the bottom of the slide here. Very much sort of, very often deployed by companies to meet perhaps a tactical requirement. But of course, as we've seen supply chain become, increasingly critical to many companies, and a real focus on the logistics function. So as opposed to, say, those individual areas, then that to me really is where that sort of term orchestration has grown out of. It's the need to look at the process all the way through from order capture and then all the way through fulfillment and all the activities that are involved in there. That if you like, as Oracle, we put together into the orchestration space. And the first of those is order orchestration. And again, if we move to the next slide, there are, again, when you're out there, sort of, if you think about the old days, if we went back perhaps 20 years, you had one way really of capturing orders. It might be through a point of sale system if you were a retailer. You would have sales orders coming in, maybe feeding into your ERP. And as we all know, those days have gone. These days there are just multiple ways of getting those orders captured. And the problem for many companies is, as their channels have expanded, so they've added just another order capture system. And then, perhaps for those, different channels that they work in, they've added a different way to fulfill those different channels. And that really, the problem with that is it's never really scalable. And it just adds complexity, and it, if you like, it makes the supply chain very opaque. And increasingly, of course, what people want is they want transparency. So regardless of, which way I might use to capture my order, say whether it's through the mobile, through the website, through click and collect, through, my classic ordering systems, and however I might choose to fulfill, whether that's, direct delivery by the vendor, or, whether it's going through my normal distribution channel or parcel e-commerce, whatever. So they want one way to look across all of that. And again, to pick up on the point that Marcel made earlier, increasingly when people are buying products these days, they're buying a combination of product and services. And I say that doesn't necessarily lend itself to the way that perhaps the classic systems out there have been built. They've been built around selling a product, not a solution that is made up of products and services. And of course, these days, as we see in the B2C market, the expectations on fulfillment are everything. You can have the greatest website in the world, but if you can't get that product into the customer's hands, and then they're not happy with it, then you'll suffer. You'll suffer not just in terms of that one sale, but of course in terms of reputation as well, because everyone's very, very happy to talk about where they've received a bad service. And so with the orchestration piece, we're really looking there at visibility across the entire process. So I really can see every time, if you like, that my supply chain and the logistics elements of my supply chain have touched that order from the point at which it was placed to the point at which it was delivered into the customer's hands. And to say that's not something that necessarily sits well with the classic systems, say the classic legacy systems that perhaps were built for the classic legacy supply chain. And to say that, the problem that's given companies is that, those solutions haven't been scalable. To your point, haven't been agile. They haven't worked on next day or within day fulfillment. They've been built around a much more classic distribution model. So if we just move forward to the next slide, so this is where, if you like, from a vendor's point of view, from an Oracle point of view, that's where we see the orchestration taking place within that control tower. So you have those multiple points of capture. That's what's happening out at the front end. Saying you could be capturing those orders, through mobile devices, tablets, websites, through franchises, through partners, through call centers. But regardless of how you capture those orders, you want to make sure that you have visibility across there. So for example, that you can look at the orders that are being placed, and you might want to prioritize by channel. You might want to prioritize by customer. But you might need to move your inventory around to fulfill all of that demand. You can't have inventory that is siloed to a particular channel. And that's really what takes us down to the bottom of the slide, where we talk about the orchestration across the fulfillment process. Because again, regardless of which system might be feeding that order in for fulfillment, you want to make sure that, say, you retain that single view. So really, order orchestration is matching those multiple points of capture and the multiple points of fulfillment. And I say that's a demand that we see growing very much from the customers that we're working with.
So if you look at this, in a normal world with all the ERP systems, you're working in batches, but now you are much more working with individual orders.
Exactly. And I say rather, in many cases, rather than working, if you like, in a batch mode, you're having to work in a real-time mode. Yeah. A lot of the customers that we work with, they can't afford to wait for, if you like, for the next batch run to happen. And of course, that's not just in the business to consumer market, it's also true in business to business. And again, I'm sure many people on the call are familiar, in certain industries, perhaps areas like automotive, where there can be huge penalties in terms of, if you don't deliver the inventory that's necessary for production to carry on. then say you have to have the agility there to be able to, receive orders, act on them in close to real time, and fulfill them, using a channel that perhaps, whilst on the first sight might be uneconomic, it's the only way of fulfilling that will get it there within the time period available. And I think that that need to look across different planning horizons and different fulfillment horizons is something that we'll see grow.
Yeah, but still, in some instances, you do need a batch run for an MRP run, in the end. So not everything should be real time.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's why you need that type of flexibility. As you say, there are always going to be things, again, a lot of the systems that many companies rely on, they still work in batch mode. You can't insist that everything comes down in real time.
Okay.
And of course, when you're, if you're sort of aggregating inventory across all the different orders that come in, you probably need to do that before you maybe make decisions about how you allocate or ration inventory.
Yeah. And you added the subscription business model also next to that as a new way of making business also in B2B.
Oh, yes, and again, I'm sure many people on this call are familiar with all the, if you like, the as a service offerings out there.
Yeah.
We've all seen sort of tires as a service, miles as a service, in terms of rather than buying a car, you can just rent time with a car, all the way through to things like door entry as a service. So people who are delivering, I think they call them door entry solutions.
Yeah.
But they're sold, not as a piece of hardware, if you like, but as a subscription. So,
Yeah.
Yes, it's installed, but then all of the services around there, and indeed all the analytics around there, can be provided as part of that service. And I say that's a very different model than, if you like, churning units off a production line, selling them, and then being done with them.
Yeah, right. So let's look at the planning side, because that's also changing.
It is indeed. It is, and again, to me, this is sort of symptomatic of companies have built up huge amounts of data and are then looking to drive value from that data. And in many cases, that means going back and analyzing it and understanding, perhaps trends that have taken place. And if they are they trends or are they exceptions? People always say, if for example, in the transport sector, if a carrier turns up late one time, that's something we tend to notice. But what if their performance is slowly degrading over time? Often you won't see that through the sort of classical analytics. But again, that sort of trend might be equally important in terms of your overall operation. I think the other thing here. Sorry, yeah, Martin.
No, Marcel was also mentioning about scenario modeling, so maybe you get into that area.
Exactly, yeah. And if we move forward to the next slide, you'll see again, it's like the area I've worked in for the last 20 years is transportation. Transportation planning and execution. So the classic, orders come in, we plan and optimize, we choose the mode, the carrier, the service level. We sort of string shipments together from road to port, from port to port, and then from port to customer. And I say that, transportation, that's typically been the focus. But now, I say people are looking, say, okay, well, and again, we've seen this for the last 6 months. What if something happens? What if a port closes? What if my carrier rates go up by 10%? What if my volumes drop by 10%? I say all of those type of what if questions. And so the ability there, if you like, again, to take not the aggregated data, but the operational data, and to run what if scenarios against there. So what if my volumes go up 5% or 10% or 20%? I mentioned that there was a customer of ours who was presenting on a webinar a week or two ago, who was talking about the impact of the current crisis on their supply chain. And they're a traditional retailer, through high street stores, in their case, pharmacies. They also had at the time, quite a small e-commerce operation, and they estimate they've seen 20 years worth of growth during the period of lockdown in that e-commerce operation. Now, again, say to understand the impact that's going to have on your supply chain, if we went back to sort of January and February and you said, oh, you're going to see 20 years growth, you probably would have been laughed out of the room. But I think, particularly now, people, if you like, they've expanded the horizons of what they have to consider happening with their supply chains. And when you do that, you don't want to come out with a theoretical answer. You want to come out with an answer you can take back and ideally put into practice. Yeah.
So is the
I think Marcel also mentioned about some work we've done with companies like Resilience 360. And again, that's about looking at risk in the supply chain. And again, I think that's another area in the sort of strategic and tactical planning that we'll see more and more. It'll be not that cost will not still be a driver. Of course it will be, cost in customer service, but I think also we'll see the impact on risk and resilience.
So the world is moving from a more static environment to a dynamic one enormously.
Mm-hmm.
So what can you expect? And there's a lot of talk about AI and machine learning. How can you apply this kind of new tools?
Yeah, and again, to me, that's sort of, again, it's symptomatic of the fact that, one thing we're not short of in the supply chain at the moment is data. And if you look at what's happening in terms, again, things that Marcel talked about in terms of, connecting devices, connecting people, connecting processes, data and the timely analysis of data is going to be one of the big challenges going forwards. And that's really where we see the emergence of, the sort of adaptive intelligence and machine learning. And I think that the key word in that is intelligence. And again, if we look in the sort of logistics space in transportation, again, predictive ETAs, we've seen those, in the market for quite a while. So the ability to take historical data, analyze all of that, understand the factors that influenced the time of arrival, whether that's the carrier or the equipment or the time of day or the time of the day of the week, the location you're delivering to, the weather, all of those factors and a whole lot more can influence the actual time of arrival. But of course, the ability now to pull data, not just from the execution systems, but also third-party data, say things like sort of weather and traffic, analyze all of that, to understand the primary influencing factors, and then, if you like, taking the results of that and then taking them back and applying them back into your operational world again. Because when we look at an ETA, we look at an ETA really at various points through execution. When the order is placed, that's when I'm making my initial commitment to the customer. When we do the planning, which could be some time after, the order has actually been placed. And then, of course, during execution. So again, the thing about sort of AI and machine learning is it can apply at multiple points, through the, if you like, through the life cycle. And it's not just things like time of arrival. Another area in transportation will be carrier capacity.
Yeah.
So
we'll get to that next. But my point is, in a lot of systems, especially in the ERP systems, a lot of the data is by default set and have never been changed in years. So in this environment, you need to change it because all the lead times and kind of stuff, mostly on default for a certain period, are changing, and this is where you have to connect this kind of AI and machine learning.
Exactly, and I think it's when it comes to the data, and you make a very good point about data needs to change. That's both the data elements themselves. So again, as we see over time, the data that you might have to hold against I don't know, an item or a carrier or a rate or an order, that can change. Now again, you don't necessarily want to be going out there and redefining the data model.
No.
If you like, every few weeks or months. So the ability to carry flexible data and to be able to define how that flexible data, if you like, the format of that, are they date fields? Are they number fields? Are they fixed length? Are they variable length? Because that, again, that gives you the agility to expand the data model without necessarily expanding, if you like, the underlying database. Okay. And then, of course, you then have to look at, if you like, how you apply, constraints and rules to that data. So again, flexibility in terms of configuration can be very important.
So you wanted to talk about the carrier capacity. So, how do you apply it in that area?
Exactly, and it's because it is a challenge that we see in many markets. I talk to my colleagues in the US, and carrier capacity is a big issue there, and it indeed, as it is in some European markets. I think the last statistics I saw show that it was about 1 in 5 truck drivers' jobs is unfilled, because, and it's a rapidly aging workforce. So, if you like, we're in that, almost perfect storm that as the requirements for transportation are increasing, clearly through the growth of things like e-commerce, and moving to, smaller, more frequent deliveries. At the same time, the traditional ways in which perhaps we, recruited people in to become truck drivers have, that's reducing. And I say it's an aging workforce as well. So companies have a strong focus now on securing that capacity. And that means, again, they need to be flexible, and they need to understand the factors that can potentially determine whether they can secure that capacity or not. Sorry, no, Martijn, you were going to say something.
No, yeah. So companies, although the future might be uncertain, they should look ahead where they expect to have capacity needed.
Yes, they should, and again, we see when companies are negotiating with with carriers for longer term rates, and contracts. There's clearly an aim in terms of, say, of securing that capacity, having that as, if you like, capacity that's in the bank. But then they're also looking and saying, well, they need some flexibility as well. And whether that's going out through, the sort of freight marketplaces, or perhaps using what I sort of tend to call the crowdsourced type of freight model, that we see with, Uber Cargo and similar. I think most importantly, it's the flexibility, to choose, almost on a load by load basis, which capacity do I deplete this from? Is it from my core capacity? Is it from the through the freight marketplace, or is it actually the crowdsourced capacity?
Yeah, interesting. So what we saw in our survey, there's a need for end-to-end supply chain visibility. You can translate it into global visibility. So look at the next block of your portfolio. So how should you use this global visibility, or how do you gain it?
Oh yeah, and again, I say, if I think back, say 20 years ago when I started in the transportation space, conferences that I went to were pretty much all about visibility. And here we are 20 years later, and you go to conferences or webinars, and it's still about visibility. But I think if you like, the nature of that visibility has changed. Perhaps 20 years ago, knowing that a truck had left and that a truck had arrived was sort of that was pretty good. These days, the visibility is becoming much more granular. I think at the same time, visibility isn't all about where's my stuff. Yes, there's the physical supply chain still, so you need to know where your shipments are, but there's also the financial supply chain. So let's say understanding really the accurate cost to serve, and there's the informational supply chain as well. And that's sort of where I look when I look at things and I think about track and trace. And say for me, the track piece is very often visibility across different systems. Because again, I mean, it's if you like, it's partly a problem of the software industry's own making. But again, people tend to deploy solutions to fix tactical problems. And the problem that you then have is that the data can become siloed. And let's say with the the growth of the criticality of supply chain to many companies, and the need to share data in an accurate and real-time manner, then say it has become a challenge to take data and get it across to the other systems that need it. And that's really how I sort of tend to look at the track piece.
Okay.
And then the trace piece. Sorry,
one thing what has changed compared to 20 years ago is now you have cloud solutions. 20 years you haven't. There were on-premise solutions, hardly to connect, and you have dedicated APIs. So for tracking and across different systems, the cloud environment is paramount to make it work after all these years.
Yes, and I mean, for me, say having spent the last sort of 35 years in the supply chain execution space, that's probably has been the single biggest change that I've seen over that time. Was that move to cloud. Because let's say if I went back to the warehousing days, if a company had 5 warehouses, you deploy the software 5 times. and you had 5 versions of software, probably 5 customized versions of software that, if you like, didn't really speak to each other, would share data perhaps back with the ERP, and that's where you got the, the overall view of what was in your warehouses. Trying to, if you can't really bring that model forward to the way that supply chains work today. Inventory is held everywhere. And you need to have visibility of all that inventory. You need to be able to get it from one place pretty easily. So say to me, cloud brings advantages in terms of transparency and visibility that we really struggled with. Say if you went back 10 or more years ago. I mean, I think at the same time, say that the data has become much more granular. And I say we'll touch on a couple of areas of that, but you can see them on here. RFID, of course, we all remember that. IoT connecting to sensors, blockchain. So there's so much going on that is both generating and consuming data, and importantly, more and more of that needs to be visible to all the different stakeholders within the supply chain, all the way through to the end customer and or consumer.
Interesting thing what you mentioned, 10 years ago or 20 years ago, the administrative truth was in the ERP environment. But now, the truth is in the cloud, because there you have all the data from different data points, different companies and different systems. So maybe the administrative truth financially is in your ERP, but the supply chain truth is in the cloud.
Yes, it is, and again, I think in many ways, say by being in the cloud, we are much closer to the data itself and to the realities of the data. But then I say we live in a world where most companies have a very heterogeneous environment. They have lots of different systems in there. And unless they have one single global instance of their ERP. That's still, for many companies, a luxury that they don't have. They might have multiple deployments of the same ERP. So yeah, I think again within supply chain data, data continues to present a challenge. Not least because we increasingly try and look at the process rather than individual products. So certainly from a logistics point of view. As Oracle, we have a portfolio. We have a portfolio of products that can be deployed individually, but importantly, we look at if you like, those products supporting a process. In this case, a sort of integrated logistics process.
So here you are. Yeah.
So, and it's.
Go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, I was going to say, I mean, if I take, just examples, whether it's just something like receiving or shipping. When you get into international shipping, there's clearly, when you look at that process, if you're exporting something, there's that link between trade. I need to produce. Do I need a license for the product I'm going to export? Do I have all my documentation prepared? Clearly on the import side, you have things like duties and tariffs. That's within a function, trade and compliance. But then, of course, you want to synchronize that with what happens with transportation and logistics. Because what I don't want is, I'm a manufacturer, I'm exporting something, product is, comes off the end of the production line, truck's there ready to take it, and suddenly I look and think, oh, hang on, I haven't got my customs paperwork here, or I haven't procured the license that I need. So I say, looking even at a simplistic level like that, looking at logistics as an integrated process, so that, say, when the product does come off, all the paperwork's there, licenses, it's been procured, it's, all attached, everything's ready to ship, nothing's going to be delayed. So I think it's important, sometimes to step back from individual products and understand where they fit within that overall process.
Yeah, it's a good way to visualize the different kind of steps in the process compared to with building blocks of systems, applications you're going to use for this whole process.
Yeah, and again, I mean, if I look at the challenge there when we talk about a process, process needs to be connected. Clearly one of the ways we can do that is physical connection through sort of sensors that then lead us to an integrated process. And I say that's really what we see with if you like the IoT area. And from an Oracle perspective, I mean, our IoT is it's applications. It's not if you like bits of technology. So delivering applications that within a supply chain can deliver value. Whether that's from monitoring production lines, whether it's keeping control of assets, understanding where those assets are, if they're still within the area they should be, if they've broken a geofence and gone out of there, if they need servicing, through to clearly the areas like fleet monitoring. I think that's a bit of a misnomer. I tend to call it more sort of freight monitoring. So because you want to look at the assets, the truck and the trailer and the container, but increasingly, as I said earlier, people actually want to look at the the freight that's within there as well.
It's quite interesting to see this slide, with different kind of solution in an IoT environment. First ask yourself, what are our main challenges for tracking our products? And then you can see, okay, you can recognize by these 4 examples what you might be needing.
Yes, indeed. And then I think what's good from there is then to think about how these link together and can deliver a more efficient process. Because I say that at the end of the day is the goal of all that data. Is it's good to capture it, good to use it for for triggering maintenance or telling people that something's going to arrive. But I say it's important to understand how all that connectivity is used in the sense of an overall end-to-end process.
All right, we have a short video.
Yeah. Oh, we don't have any sound from it though. I'm afraid, Martijn. There should be a soundtrack to it. Not to worry, I can explain the soundtrack. I mean, really what we're seeing here is that interaction between systems. So, this is an example of somebody who's ordered something. We've done the planning and optimization from a transportation point of view. There's a problem. The problem in this case is that something has actually gone wrong with the vehicle itself. That's picked up through the IoT. You can see here that feeds back and raises an alert. We also then by that link back into transportation can make sure that we divert that shipment whilst it's in transit. You can see here, say that problem is with the refrigeration unit, the example that Marcel talked about earlier. And I say by that interaction of knowing there's a problem, understanding the network that we're working within, being able to divert that shipment whilst it's in transit to go to a service area, for the problem to be rectified. And then to be rerouted so it still goes back to its original location. At the same time, making sure that the other participants in the supply chain are aware of what's going on. So in this case, sending information through to the party that's going to receive that shipment when the vehicle breaks a geofence, so that rather than standing around on the receiving dock waiting for a truck that isn't going to arrive, they get notified in time. Again, because like if I think about many retail operations, the people who do the unloading might be the ones who are actually out on the shop floor, replenishing the shelves. So I say this is talking about how you sort of link that end-to-end process. And I know we provide the the URL, the link to the full video. We'll be sending that through with the slides. I mean, we finished, that little clip of the video, finished on, the use of a mobile phone. And again, I think back to your point, Martijn, about, the use of AI and machine learning. It's not something that perhaps, we typically associate with a mobile app. But when you're providing that sort of chatbot type capability, it needs to be intelligent, needs to understand who's asking the question. Oh, well, if it's this person, these are the orders, and they're asking where their shipment is. It's this person, here are the orders they placed. These are the shipments that are scheduled to be delivered. They should be delivered within this time window. So this is the shipment that they're likely to be interested in. Because very often when you interact with this type of device, you don't have the shipment ID with you. No. So if you like, the chatbot has to be intelligent enough to sort of hold a conversation, where you say may not have all those key items of data.
And it's quite nice to see that, in a normal way as consumers, we have all our mobiles, ordering pizza, whatever. And it's good to see that it's also now available in the B2B environment in the same kind of a way.
Yeah, and I think I mean, this shows it as a mobile device. Of course, it could be through a conversational UI. You could be sitting in your receiving office and say, hey Alexa, where's my shipment? Because say if you like, the front end is almost immaterial, whether it's a browser or a mobile device or say a conversational UI. Again, it's separating the physical way you interact from what happens behind the scenes, as it were.
So the next two deliveries, inventory is also a major point. Where is my inventory?
Yeah, and again, I think I mentioned earlier, back in the old WMS days, if you had 5 different warehouses, you deploy a WMS 5 times, and that was good then. That was the way that sort of warehouses worked, and many supply chains worked. But I say in the current environment, inventory is held everywhere, and people want they want to understand where their inventory is. Even it might be in the backroom storage of a retail store. Or it might be a very small location where they've only got 100 or so items of inventory and then 2 or 3 people working. Now in the past, it would have just simply been uneconomic to employ or deploy a traditional WMS there. And to your point, Martijn, that's somewhere where the cloud has just changed the dynamic. So we have customers who are deploying a cloud WMS to get a global view of their inventory across everything from those small locations through to fully automated operations.
So you get more virtual warehouses around the world in the cloud, maybe also with reserve stock and non-reserve stock, that kind of thing.
Yes, you do, and again, if we think about how businesses work these days, there's a lot more temporary storage around. I'd say it's not necessarily a story at the top of the newspapers these days, but with Brexit coming up, warehouse space in the UK is at a premium. People are almost stockpiling warehousing space. Well, if you have those warehouses for a period of time, you still need a system to run them. And as I say, cloud gives you, the capability to deploy a warehouse quickly, run a warehouse perhaps for 3 or 6 months, and then, switch and use it somewhere else.
So and around warehouses, you also need more insights and overall view, I would say.
Yes, yeah, and say we saw some of that in the video, and this sort of slide just sort of summarizes that. Say the idea that warehouses and transportation have to interact. So as the truck is approaching, say it might be 10 or 15 kilometers away, does it have a receiving door allocated to it? If it does, fine. Then as it comes through the gatehouse, then direct the truck accordingly. If it doesn't, then you want to interact with the WMS. Okay, what's on that truck? Is it a priority delivery? Is it inventory I have to get straight away? Because I have to ship it out. Okay, then send it to a priority receiving door, get it booked in, make the process as smooth as possible. So again, this is all about interacting to make sure the process is as efficient as possible.
So let's talk now about supply chain challenges across industries.
Yeah, and so if again, this was some data you can see here across a variety of industries, and for me, what it highlights is a couple of things. One is despite the fact that we focused on supply chains, well, probably for certainly more than the 30 years I've been involved with them, there's still a huge amount of inefficiency in there. And that again is one of the reasons why companies have still have that strong focus on improving their supply chain. So look at things like the vaccines here at the top left. 25% were degraded because they were, if you like, incorrect. They were treated in the wrong conditions during shipping. Maybe they went out of the temperature range, the example that Marcel talked about earlier. At the other end, the other side of the slide, if you look in the food industry, 56 trillion kilos of food was recalled. The problem with this, firstly, it's the inefficiency that it highlights, but secondly, many of these activities would have involved parties that, if you like, were outside of the traditional supply chain. They weren't under the control, perhaps, of the retailer or the manufacturer. And again, that's just a facet of the modern supply chain. Lots and lots of parties involved, and which really means there are supply chains running. There are multiple supply chains running together.
So actually, you need visibility across supply chains.
You do. And say we saw some early iterations of this with things like CPFR, collaborative planning, forecasting, and replenishment. But But to say when you get to multiple supply chains, what I would call the multi-tier supply chains, say you need to have the underlying principles you can see here in place. So you need to have the trust, you need to have the transparency. They need to be very agile, because when you're running multiple supply chains, you're trying to coordinate multiple supply chains. It says like keeping sort of plates spinning in the air. There's an awful lot going on. And of course, you need that data to be, to be exchanged. And ideally, you need that data to be exchanged in as near real time as possible. Because if we think of that example, of a truck going along and the temperature goes wrong, if you've got a temperature critical cargo on there, then you need to know about that as soon as possible, because you might have to go back and go through your planning cycle again, because that inventory is no longer any good. So now I have to go back, have to look at all my inventory, see all the other orders that I that if you like are in jeopardy as well, and get something allocated and executed as quickly as possible. So it does introduce, if you like, another layer of complexity.
So you actually need a multi-tier supply chain.
Yes, you do. Yeah, and I think what we're seeing there is really the first real use cases that use blockchain. And I mean, blockchain, I know it's much hyped, but the underlying capabilities of blockchain, the immutability of it, the fact that once data is there, it can't be changed without all the parties agreeing to it. The fact that different parties can have permissioned views of that data is increasingly important. Because again, you think about the sort of use cases that we're seeing coming to the fore, things around, product provenance, product lineage. If I'm selling a premium product, then my customer or the consumer, wants to be sure that they're actually buying, the right premium product. It's not a counterfeit. If I'm buying a product, maybe I want to understand, does it contain any allergens? If I'm selling a product, maybe that product can be recycled afterwards. So I say, as you look at that sort of end-to-end supply chain, and the need to interact with all the different parties involved in there, that I say to me is where some of the underlying capabilities of blockchain really start to come into play, because it can feed in data to all those other systems. It can extract data from all those other systems. You can share that data across different parties in a way that say delivers some capabilities we really struggled with the systems, if you like, that we're familiar with from 10 or more years ago.
So the connectivity across different kind of systems, that's the real key, I would say, in this.
It is, and I say, if I look, from an Oracle point of view, I mean, I think Marcel said, when we started, we have a complete supply chain cloud portfolio, and I've talked about a couple of those products in a little bit more detail here. And so the way we look at it, like with our blockchain intelligent track and trace application, which is an application, well, you'd integrate it with all those other systems, whether that's procurement for purchase orders, whether it's transportation, warehousing, manufacturing. But of course, I also said that earlier on that many environments out there are heterogeneous. They have lots of different systems out there, so it has to be agnostic, has to be able to interact with other systems as well, even if they're not Oracle systems. And that again means systems have to be very, very open. Have to be able to exchange and consume data, regardless of the, if you like, the different application vendors that you're working with.
Yeah, and apart from the planners, the managers and the executives need also a better view. So let's get to the last and final block of your portfolio, and let's talk about analytics and decision support. I would say, Marcel, I think that companies, especially decision makers, are in need of a more visual dashboard.
Absolutely. Yeah. By the way, you guys, I think you can go on forever with the two of you. It was really a pleasure to watch and to listen to. Allow me maybe to come back to one thing that was said. It was about agility, because I think sometimes you hear a lot about it, what it is and what it isn't. Mm-hmm. So what I see is that we get better and better access to systems and these systems can do more things. They can plan more. At the same time, what you were talking about is visibility increases. Yeah, it was, let's say, we were happy when we know where the truck was, and now we need to know each shipment at every time. For me, agility is really, can we act? So if we see that something goes wrong, can we really change that at that moment in time? Do we have the systems that allow that change? And there, I think if you were in a world where you have 1 or 2 deviations per day, then it's all nice. Your people are flexible and you solve it. You call a carrier and you fix it. When you're in a world where everything is in flux and everything goes wrong, basically, you can't do that manually anymore. And you got to have systems that just redirect all those things that are going wrong. And that's for me really working towards that agile process. And that's pretty complicated, obviously. Okay, that aside, let's focus on analytics. I think we see analytics on a couple of levels. First of all, I think what everybody knows is like, okay, you got processes and you want to know what's going wrong in that process. We don't need to highlight what is going right. And a couple of things were said, like sometimes things slowly degrade. You had a fantastic supplier, but over time he's getting less and less reliable. Do you know that? And it's these kind of alerts, these kind of changes of things that go south is what you want to know. I think that's the first layer. If you go a slide further, then basically we start to see like here on fulfillment performance. What kind of KPIs can you have? And these KPIs are basically per function. Every function wants to know something differently, and it's very process oriented. In this case, on fulfillment, like how much deliveries do I have on time, or for instance, how much deliveries do I have on time in full, and that says something about my performance. And I want to track that, and I also want to drill down on that. So let's say the 5 or 10% that didn't go well, what was actually the cause of that? Was it in this case, let's say, an item master data error, or was it something in transit, or was it a supplier that isn't reliable? So what we have to do is in any analytics is to see, you have certain KPIs that you want to follow. If things go wrong, you want to drill down on specific elements of that or specific shipments, and you want to know the root cause of that. That is absolutely critical. And what we do in systems is keeping that data together, so you can really drill down and improve from there. And if you go to the last one, the more complicated one, I think is I really see that as an overall supply chain problem. And I'm already, since my study on the Transport Academy in Venlo, I'm a part of this beautiful community. I'm definitely not better than the rest. Is how do we bring that back to the business? We supply chain guys are very good to live in our own world, but how do you connect to the wider business and finance? And I think we find that hard, and that's where we try to spend a lot of time and effort in our systems, because we are a complete ERP company that delivers the solutions end to end. Is how do we tie that back into the finance and business kind of the business? So let's say cost to serve. Is that growing? Is that declining? Is that, how are we actually doing as a supply chain function? Is something that is I think is more and more critical, and especially also to put ourselves on the map, is to make sure that we always get that link back to the business. Simple things like how much time does it cost to get the money in? Let's say from order to cash. Are we able to shrink that with a couple of days? There are massive things for our finance department where we, as a supply chain function, have big influence on. And that kind of reporting, I think, is crucial to make sure that the supply chain department can shine and really show how valuable the department is. And also there, I think, I think I said it in the beginning. I think more and more companies are competing on supply chains, and it also brings almost the responsibility from a supply chain perspective to report that in a very professional way back to the business and the and finance organizations.
I have a comment.
Probably enough said.
Yeah. Well, one thing,
Yes, Martijn.
It's good to see the cost to serve finally in here. Companies need it. Cost to serve on an order level or an SKU level, or even on a customer level, because then we get rid of the averages. And then we get clear decisions what to do with certain orders, SKUs, customers, and so forth and so on.
Absolutely. So let's say typical situation, this very important customer that everybody from the sales department sees as the best customer in town.
Mm-hmm.
Is he that profitable? Or should we rather get rid of this customer? Maybe it's much more profitable for us as an organization, because he is the guy that is putting everything at risk and wants the latest, greatest tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock in his warehouse. It's those kind of things that data can provide that kind of information. It's there, but you got to find it. You got to report that back, and then you get real business decisions on where do we make our money and where is it just where do we think that we make money. Yeah.
So we almost, or actually on the hour, but I want to close off with some benefits and to discuss with you both. There are different kind of benefits gained with your kind of solutions, especially in the cloud.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. You want to take this, Dominic?
No, I was just going to say, I think you're right. At the end of the day, it all has to come back to delivering benefit to the if you like, to the user. As I say, it's having great software is one thing, but it has to deliver value. And I think that's perhaps where we're fortunate that we have many customers out there who've taken these products and received value from them and have talked about that. So sorry, that's all I was going to say, Marcel.
Yeah, no, it probably speaks for itself. That's with, let's say, the time, we also want to keep a little bit of time for questions and answers. I think this speaks for itself. You see very, very strong increases. I can just highlight here one thing on what you see on load utilization. Average reportings that we get on, for instance, installing and transportation management from us is about 10% less cost. Yeah, which is huge if you take larger companies and freight spend that they have. The final closing, we wanted just to let me keep this very short because I don't want to use too much time to advertise what we do. If it wasn't clear from all the rest, then I'm not gonna convince anybody here. Probably good to know is that we started this 7 years ago, and where we are in cloud, and obviously cloud has to be appealing for you if you believe in this. We started this 7 years ago, so we are already there where I think a lot of other people would like to be, and there's a lot of problems that you will encounter by having real scalable big software functionalities in cloud. It's not that easy. And the other thing is that by being Oracle and all our technology that we have, we've made it super scalable and secure. I don't want to elaborate on the TikTok news that you recently saw because everybody will have seen that. But I did see an article in the Financial Times, for instance, saying that, well, Oracle would be a great house for TikTok because it's of its security. And it didn't mention any other bidders there. So I mean, that highlights how immense secure our systems are. And I think the most critical for supply chain people is that we don't deliver upgrades anymore. We innovate continuously by quarterly updates to the software. So it's like working with other systems like what is it, Gmail, whatever. You just get a new version every quarter, and it just has all the newest innovation. And the key element is that we drive that information with user groups. So we have big user groups of our solutions, and they have a very active participation in it. That's probably where I would like to leave this.
All right. Some questions. We are running overtime because, I think that the conversation quite interactive with Dominic, and I asked also already some questions from the audience actually. So basically, my question first, and there's also a question from the audience. So, how long would it take to implement such a cloud solution?
You want to take it, Dominique? Shall I take
Yeah,
it?
I can. Yeah. Again, I think that's the classic. How long's a piece of string to some extent. It depends. What a customer wants to do. Now, let me try and put a bit of flesh on those bones. I mean, we've had customers who, for example, taken the transportation solution and deployed it in 14, 16, 18 weeks. But that's really been into an environment where perhaps their focus has been on visibility. As opposed to areas like the planning and optimization, which clearly rely on capturing more data, all the carriers, the rates, the service levels. So it can be deployed very quickly. But again, what I would say is most customers tend to deploy in phases, and they use the value they generate from each phase to drive the next one, and also to get more business buy-in. Because what we tend to see is once something is in and running, then other parts of the business look and say, oh, I'd like some of that as well, please. So deploying in phases gives the ability to generate value that can, if you like, almost sort of fund the ongoing project, but also to get real business buy-in. That's different than it was in the past, where something took 2 years to implement, started with a fanfare, and 18 months later people said, whatever happened to that?
Yeah. So another question tying into this, does Oracle give advice which application to deploy first, or what makes sense the most?
Yeah, let me maybe answer that one as well. I mean, we do, and I mentioned when you showed that slide with all the the customer benefits on, we do a lot of work with customers before they've made the decision to acquire software. We do work with them on the business case. Because again, supply chains are complex by their very nature, and very often people think well, where should I start? And you can't really determine where to start until you understand the benefits that are going to be delivered from that. So, for example, we have a team called Insight. They primarily come from a management consulting background, but we provide them, they go and speak to customers, say before customers have made a decision about which software they should deploy and the phasing of that software, to help them build the business case. And clearly, in areas like transportation, again, that's somewhere where I get involved with as well. But what comes out of that, and that's not, that's a free service, not something we charge customers for. But what comes out of that is, a much clearer understanding of, not just what the project is going to entail in terms of cost and time, but also what it can deliver in terms of benefits.
Another one, I have to summarize it. There seems to be some companies scared of how to connect with all existing applications. So in the old days, you should write all kind of customized APIs. How do you know that all existing systems can be connected to an Oracle application in the cloud?
I would always, you can give a very technical answer, which is probably not very helpful. I would always check out references.
Okay.
Like, if I have these kind of systems, where has this been done?
Yeah.
And typically, what you see there is then you have people that have done it, and you have people that say they can do it, and then better rely on the people that have done it.
Yeah. Okay. And another question, we see more and more external data coming into systems, from retailers, point of sale, carriers, and so forth and so on. So how easy, or where does all this data coming from, and how easy is it to get it?
Yeah, and maybe again, if I get my perspective on that based on the area that I work in sort of transportation and logistics, when I said earlier, the one thing we're not short of in supply chain is data. And I say that's just data that that we generate, as opposed as well as all that data that's out there and available. I mean, I think the first thing here is clearly to consume data, you have to have the integrations. And I mean, for example, all of our integrations are out there published on the web. And all our customers, in cloud, all use exactly the same integrations. So, I mean, that's standard across all our, say, all the customers who use our logistics cloud products. There, if you like, the integrations are the same, and that's, say, why they're published out there. I think when you get into third-party data, there is some third-party data you might want to pull into transportation, perhaps things like sailing schedules, but then also again, different providers make available data. I talked about weather, I talked about traffic conditions. We work with partners for whom that's what they do. They collect that data. They use it as part of sort of mapping and distance. And then because we have a standard integration with them, that means that we can consume that data, in terms of looking at it from a transportation point of view.
So there also, you mentioned DHL resilience. So how is this risk data being used and connected to Oracle applications?
Oh, sorry, yeah, I mean, I think, sorry, there's a huge thunderstorm starting here. I mean, I think if you look at that, then say that's something that DHL have done within their deployment. So OTM, shipments are generated. That's what it does. It takes orders, creates shipments, and then those work with those are exported into Resilience 360. They're integrated there. So then you can look at those shipments and understand the risk implications. And then as risks develop, as they tend to, then those can be fed back into OTM. So say it's not just a sort of snapshot, but it's an ongoing understanding of that interaction between risk and shipment, as it were.
I thought you meant that DHL resilience was responsible for the thunderstorm over there, but
they're much more powerful than I thought.
All right. So yeah, there are some questions, more technical ones, and about costs and that kind of stuff. But I don't know if we want to take it because we were already running over time. But it's good to see that people are hanging on and keep on listening. So I don't know if you have more to say. I would suggest to close it off. We have some more content available on your site now, so you will be able to see the video, the extensive one. There's some interesting content also about this different cloud solutions. On our side, on Supply Chain Media, we have created an end-to-end supply chain visibility assessment that's open source to see, on the operational planning and financial level, where are your white spots, so you can get an overview where are your white spots to start with that might be of use. So there are a lot more to read and to download, I would say. And but before signing up, I would say, Marcel, what is your first recommendation to the audience to start in visibility and collaboration?
Oh, oh my, yeah. I would just say, yeah. Wow. No, you caught me by surprise because I had something else in my head. Be super open-minded. Don't think that. Just look at any part of the supply chain at this moment. I think that everything that is there for several years is outdated, will not support the future. Yeah. Many companies are fighting with the latest and greatest, startups that have no legacy, have no technical depth. And you gotta be very, very much out of the box thinking to be the leader in about 4 or 5 years from now. And just by some small steps and small adjustments, you're not going to be there. That's my absolute conviction. Okay,
Dominic, some recommendations to sign up with?
Yeah, I guess I had the luxury of a little bit of time there. So I say, from my point of view, I mean, I always think the best thing you can do is be inquisitive. And what I mean by that is there are some really great examples around visibility and collaboration and the projects that are happening around those. And it might be outside of your industry, it might be outside of your geography. Yeah. But as I say, there are a huge number of use cases that you can go and have a read of across all sorts of industries, all sorts of processes. And I say, I think looking at those and then perhaps questioning how can we take those principles and apply them back into our business. So, okay. I think being inquisitive and being open-minded, you know, and say having a look at what else is going on out there. That's, you know, that sort of time is never going to be wasted.
Okay, good. Great advice. You know, thanks a lot for explaining a lot. You know, so I would like to wrap it up, and I want to also like to thank the audience for all the questions and for their attendance. And you know, I hope to see them back. And you know, Marcel, Dominic, thank you for your expertise. Thank you.
Thank you, Martijn.
Big pleasure, and thanks everybody for that time. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.